history is malleable, and depending on what we were taught, dictates what we believe, and what we believe dictates how we perceive this reality and the actions that we take within it. So it's very important to analyze history and learn to make our own judgments on it, our own interpretations of it based on all of the evidence, because then we get to act from a place that's actually of our own sovereign thought. And this has never been more true for me, moving from England to America. And I spent the first 27 years of my life in England, and I've been here for about 4 years now. And every year there's obviously different events, different days that are celebrated from American history that I'm relatively new to. And it's been interesting to observe the difference in how those events are taught in England compared to how they are taught in America. And none more so than Independence Day, because the way that it is interpreted in England is very different to America. And I'm not going to go into the specifics of who says what. And what I'm going to do instead is give my current understanding of the history of Independence Day and really the last couple of 100 years of American history that I've been studying. And I want to give my interpretation of it with the intentions of opening new doors for you. If you've never heard the history shared this way, if it's new to you, I believe that it is absolutely influencing your life. And if you do not have a empowered interpretation of history and the systems that have been installed throughout history, it's likely that it's going to be something that's keeping you boxed in. And I also want to repel 97%, maybe 98% of prospective viewers of this channel and this content with my interpretation of history. They are my intentions. Let's dive into it. So from my perspective, Independence Day occurred because there was a select group of men, a relatively small percentage of men that were living in the American colony that did not like how things were being operated. They didn't like the systems of oppression that they felt they were experiencing, and therefore they started a revolution. They wanted to change things, and it ended up with war. And as a result of that war, they came out the other side independent. And off the back of that, about a decade later, they created the Constitution, which is essentially a meeting of the minds, a contract between who at the time they deemed to be the most influential men. And it was an agreement of terms of like, this is how we're going to live, this is how we're going to operate, this is what's going to be the fiscal system, this is going to be the political system, this is the rights that each individual has, etc., etc. And you can go read the Constitution and see what they agreed upon. And for the most part, I lean into that as a good way of operating. There are obviously nuances within the Constitution that may be a little bit outdated, but there's clearly a reason why I'm here in America and not back in England, and it's largely because I resonate with the freedom aspect and the freedom-driven approach that they fought for and won. I resonate with that. However, if we look at American history since the inception of both independence and the Constitution, it's changed significantly. And the changes influence our day-to-day life now more, I think, than those two events, even though we don't actually, there's no specific days for the events I'm going to talk about that are celebrated. I think these events impact day-to-day life now more than the Constitution did, and that is a relatively bold claim, but I'll let you do your own interpretation and your own research as always, because the key dates that I've got down here are the times where the US went significantly into debt. In fact, it's been, depending on how you, again, all of this is your own interpretation, the US has been bankrupt 5 times. And if you think about that, who is buying them out? And if you look at various sources, you will find that it is, quote unquote, foreign investors, foreign bankers, foreign money that bailed out the US. And obviously this changes a lot because it goes from a state that was free and independent to now a state that is in debt. And the debtor is always owing the creditor, and the creditor is always the one that is in charge. So think about that on a macro level. That's what's happening, and that changes the day-to-day life of the American citizen, because at a macro level, they are quote-unquote owned now by somebody else. That doesn't sound very independent to me, and that's happened 5 times. The next key important date is 1911, and I'm just going to preface this once more. All of this in history is open for interpretation, and if your sources say different, that is not unlikely, because history is a canvas that people paint on. You need to do your own research. But in 1911, as far as I can see, there was a meeting on Jekyll Island between the largest, most influential families in America, and the meeting was essentially to talk about how we're going to regain control of our country and how we're going to rule it like our forefathers did in England and Great Britain. Because if you look at English and Great Britain history, you will see very clearly that it is literally owned by powerful families. That's why they have a royal family, because the bloodline is clean, Watson, and blah, 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 all that shit. That's what they were fighting against originally. But that's what the meeting was for, and off the back of that meeting, there's a really good book about this called The Monster of Jekyll Island. They created for-profit, federal-sounding entities, one called the IRS and one called the Federal Reserve Banking System. They're kind of interlinked, obviously, but they were just created by people who wanted to have influence. So off the back of those two systems, what has occurred is a nation and a day-to-day existence where you are kind of an indentured slave from birth, because that's how they really did it. They started to make amendments to the Constitution, and they created a way that when you are born, you are given a birth certificate. But really what that is, from my interpretation, is you are given an all capitals legal fiction name, and you are entered into a system where you can be taxed and tracked and controlled. And if these words make you feel independent, good for you. They don't make me feel independent, and I'll get to that in just a minute. But that was created, and therefore many of us spend our lives operating under the belief that those systems are real and true and just, up for your interpretation. But that changed a lot, and then it changed even more when America was officially taken off the gold standard, where currency as we know it is now a fiat currency, F-I-A-T. It's not backed by anything, meaning it can be printed to infinity, it can be manipulated as much as possible. And again, think about the outcome of that in a day-to-day aspect. It means that we are controlled and to some extent oppressed by a system that is an illusion. It used to mean something. The notes used to be credit notes, they got turned into debt notes. And if you think about these perspectives and lenses and these walls, I feel, that can come up, you don't even realize it's happening, and you have to pick your way through it to find what you believe to be the truth. Because if you just zoom out, and if you need to pause this video, just reflect on I've just breezed over this 200 years history, but think about all of these systems and how they've been created sequentially, and the outcome in your life, the perspectives that you live by, how much is it influencing you? And on Independence Day this year, I want you to question, how independent are you? And if you feel like you are not that independent, the next question is, do you even value that? Because I've come to the realization that at least 97% of people just don't care. They just don't care. And that's fine. In their value structure, independence, freedom, sovereignty, self-autonomy, they're not valuable to them. Instead, they don't mind going with the flow and floating with the flossom and having their energy harvested and living under some quasi-okay rules and conditions to life. They're okay with that. And for a long time, I wasn't okay that they were okay with that, and I tried to change them and give them another way, but I've realised it's completely pointless because they don't value it. So the question is, do you value it? Because if you do, and you want to achieve it, you want to be independent, and this Independence Day compared to last one, I'm more independent. I'm still not completely independent, but I'm more independent, I'm more sovereign, and that's a good trajectory that I'm on, because a decade from now will be very different, 2 decades, etc., etc. Is like, do you value it? Because if you do, there is work and understandings and inner healing that's required to take down the walls of the box that are keeping you where you're at. And there is work, but to me it's worthy work. I value this. I value independence. I value sovereignty. I value freedom. So if you value those things, this channel and the community that I have put together, that I don't own, that I've put together, is for men who do value that and are willing to recalibrate and challenge the beliefs and systems that are not keeping them free, with the intention of living independent. Because just like in history, those core events that and there's obviously loads of others, but those core events all happened to create what we have now. It's like, okay, so in your future, what are the core events that have happened in your past that are positively influencing your present moment? Because if you decide that I'm going to live free, sovereign, independent, and on my own terms, that's a core event. Because off the back of that decision, you're going to start acting differently. You're going to start to take on new beliefs and then act even more differently. And then your actions create your reality, as does your frequency and your inner understanding of reality. But that's a core event. And the minute you decide that, life is going to take a pivot. For me, that was when it was actually the day I got diagnosed with cancer. I was like, what? I was like, how have I followed all the rules, every guideline, that was laid in front of me, and I end up here at 21 and having cancer? I was like, this is absurd. And I made the decision that day, a decade ago, that I was going to live a completely different life on my own terms. I just decided that's a core event for me. To see how easy I recall it. I couldn't tell you what room I was in, how I was thinking, the music that was playing. It's like an event that's just stamped in my mind, just as these events were stamped into American history and get celebrated every year. It's like, what's that going to be for you? Because I'm talking now, this channel is for the small percentage of men who are ready to make that decision, or have already made it and are looking for guidance to continue on it. Because if you're listening to this and it kind of resonates at any level, it's like, well, you're here for a reason. You could be anywhere right now. You could be watching anything. It's infinite. We're in an infinite world. But for whatever reason, and you can decide on this, the frequency and the energy that I am releasing right now has resonated with you, and you have been drawn into it. And is that because you are ready for independence? Is that because you are ready to pursue freedom, self-sovereignty, self-autonomy? All of these words, authentic expression. That's what I'm about. That's what this is for. That's what this channel is for. And if that is you, I want to just future pace that the real truth of it all is that you do not unplug from it. You unplug it from you. And I want you to think on that, because that is a download. You do not unplug from it. You unplug it from you. And that's a small hinge that can swing a big door. But that's what I'm going to be doing today, is reflecting on independence. And I encourage you to do the same thing. What does it mean to you? What does this day mean? What does the rest of the celebrated days in American history mean to you? And if you're not from America, this is still going to influence you, because if you look around at your system, depending on where you are, not every country has it, but most states operate under a very, very similar system, because it works to harvest energy and keep the state growing. So I want you to think on this and put a flag in the ground, a checkpoint as to, this is how independent I am, this is how independent I want to be. And then a year from now, you can assess that, assess how differently you're living. Because I speak to and have spoken to hundreds of dudes, for example, that just say to me, I'm working a job I don't want to work, and what do I do instead? It's like, you figure it out. You find a mentor, you find a guide. I offer that, but it doesn't have to be me. You could do it by yourself. You can find, there's loads of people that do it. There's good men out there that are willing to share that. But you can't just keep saying that and then not make the changes, because next Independence Day, you're going to be in the same spot. And it's the same for all things: physical fitness, spiritual health, anything. It's like the onus is on you, that you're the one responsible for your independence. Nobody else is coming to save you. Just like in 1776, when that small percentage of people finally got the end result, the other 97%, you could argue, benefited exponentially from that. And the same will happen in your life, that when you fight for for your freedom and your independence, if it is important to you. Everybody around you, your family, friends, they'll either leave because they are happy to be obese slaves, or they'll move with you. So it's your choice. I don't know what you think on that today. I've been ranting for plenty of minutes now. But if you have enjoyed this content, this has been Unboxable Kings, and our mission is to unbox the king that lives within you. And understanding history, all of these systems, our interpretation, reality, everything is very important along this journey. So if you pick up on any topics that you want me to touch on more in this video, please comment them below and I can elaborate to suit. But I wish you all a very independent 4th of July, and I'll see you next time. I've been Joshua. This has been Unboxable Kings. Thank you very much for watching. Much love. Peace.